Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. So my name is Lewis, and today I want to bring you 4 games played in the 2021 US Championships in the open section. These were all games between rounds 1 to round 3, and I chose them because I think they provide the most instructive value. There were a couple of more decisive games, but I think these were the most interesting also. So the first game here, Robson has the white pieces, and he's up against Daniel Naroditsky with the black pieces. So a new face in the US Championship chess scene. And so here, Robson opens up with e4, and Naroditsky replies with knight f6. So the Alekhine's defense, and it has a reputation of maybe being slightly better for white, but it's very tricky, and there are some things in opening that we need to avoid. Though typically white is considered to have a small edge. And after e5, knight d5, d4, knight d6, c4, knight b6, and here Robson decides to go for the 4 pawns attack with f4. And maybe another way to play is e takes d6, and both recaptures of c takes d6 and c takes d6 and e takes d6 are playable, but I think this is like maybe the most common way you'd probably setup you'd probably see, with like the bishop coming to g7. And overall, it's clear that white has a slight advantage with the 2 central pawns, but black is still very solid, has great potential here with the bishop coming to g7, and yeah, it's still definitely playable for black. So maybe just avoiding the kind of like the main lines, Robson decides to go for the aggressive option of the 4 pawns attack. f4, d takes e5, f takes e5, and knight c6. And here, bishop e3. So the natural move, I'm sure, as maybe many of you want to play, like knight f3, probably just runs into bishop g4, and like we're already being pinned here, and we need to defend our center. And it's our center is very fragile here with e6 coming next, and this bishop is already much better than if it were, for example, on f5 and not doing that much. And for that reason, we want to avoid playing knight f3 first, and so we play bishop e3. So kind of neglecting our kingside development for a bit, but it's very important to support our center here. And so bishop f5 is played, knight c3, e6, and only now knight f3. And so playing the move bishop g4 is just a waste of time. So white got a slightly better version of the other variation. Bishop e7, bishop e2, castles, and f6 here. So this is a standard way to try to open up the position, because the bishop on e7 is also is not particularly good. So this is a reasonable option. Though the problem that we see is that after e takes f6 and bishop takes f6, this e6 pawn is going to be permanently weak, and it's not easy to get rid of the weakness because we have many defenders on the d file, and also this e5 square is being controlled by white significantly. So if black ever pushes e5, then we can immediately go for d5, and we should be better there with a massive pawn majority. So queen d2, queen e7, and rook ad1. So maybe I just want to point out the approach that Robson is taking, which is just slowly improve the position. Developing the queen with queen d2, rook ad1, placing the pieces on good squares, and in the long run, it's kind of difficult for black to find a good plan after white has optimized all their pieces. So rook ad8, king h1, a useful move to get out of this long diagonal, for example, and h6, h3, preventing the bishop from possibly going to g4, and rook d7, and queen c1. So this move I also like very much. The idea is that obviously the rook influences the d file, and we just want to step our queen away from the d file here. And there might be ideas in the future of doubling up as well. Rook e8 and rook d2. So instead of rook d2, the engine apparently says that d5 is already a killer blow after e takes d5, bishop takes b6, ab6, cd5, and you cannot play knight e5 here because of knight e5, queen e5, and a very nice tactic. Rook takes f5 with bishop g4 coming, and the rook is lost. And so, for example, if you have to go knight b8, then this is quite a miserable position. But I still like this move, rook d2, that was played instead of the immediate d5, because it just shows how dominating white's position is. Which is, if you can get this type of game and this nature of the position against the Alekhines, I think you'd be doing just practically very great. And so the idea is obviously just to double up the rooks. And after queen d8, rook fd1, king h8, and b3, solidifying. So we see, it's just slowly that black is kind of running out of moves, useful moves to make here. Bishop h7, bishop g1, knight c8, d5, and suddenly White's initiative is immense here. ed5, knight d5, bishop e4 in an attempt to trade off some pieces, because we see that, I mean, the general rule is that if the side that has less space wants to trade pieces, because it will free up their position, and hopefully the space domination wouldn't be that relevant in a in the event that many pieces are exchanged. So knight f6, rook takes d2, knight takes d2 is a nice move here. The point being that in this position, black is in a lot of trouble, because if black does a natural capture on f6, after knight e4, rook e4, bishop e3, for example, rook e8, and rook f1, I mean, we can just compare all of white's pieces. The bishop on d3 is great, the bishop on g1 has amazing potential. White has the bishop pair, this rook is doing fantastic on the f-file. These knights are not coordinated at all, and yeah, white is just crushing here positionally. And so after knight takes d2 here, Naroditsky decides to go to muddy the waters here with bishop takes g2. So the move recommended by the engine, but still it's clearly worse for black here. After king takes g2 and rook takes e2 and king f1, black is down a full piece right now, and so the engine recommends a move like rook e6, but after knight d5, I really don't see the compensation here for black, because there is none. And so Naroditsky tries rook takes d2, but after rook takes d2, queen f6, rook f2, queen d8. The game from here on was just pretty clinical. White is simply up an exchange, and also, yeah, simply up an exchange, I believe. I mean, for a pawn. After queen d2, queen e8, queen f4, yeah, white is just cleaning up here, and the rest of the game is pretty straightforward. Though there are some tricks here with threat of a threefold repetition, but after king d2, knight d4, queen f4, the game was pretty smooth here with bishop e5, knight g5, and queen g5. So yeah, the queen is lost, and white is up too much material. So that was a very nice game, I think, by Robson, especially going for the 4 pawns attack, and it's a very very model game in the Alekhine's defense, facing it. So that's from the first round. The next game I want to show is a game played between WhiteElo with the white pieces against Darius Schwartz, played in the second round. And yeah, WhiteElo opens up with e4, c5, knight f3, d6, and bishop b5 check. So going for the Moscow variation. And I mean, this has become more popular among the top players recently. And yeah, after bishop d7, there are many options here. There's the moves bishop d7, which is a simpler option. There's also the move knight d7, which maybe the most top of players go for. And there's also maybe knight c6, which is not very popular. But bishop d7 here was played. And after bishop d7, queen takes d7 is the most common move. c4, knight f6, knight c3, knight c6, and d4 here. So I believe that in the game played between, if you remember about Garry Kasparov versus the world, played over the internet in like 1999, the move played in that game was like castles, and then g6, d4, cd4, knight d4, bishop g7, and then knight e2 was played. And the world chose to play the move queen e6 here, which which wins a pawn, but we later found out that it's inferior and not a very good move. I think the engine already gives like plus 0.9 or something along those lines. But yeah, that's just a little side note, a little tangent. But here, d4 is played, and after queen g4, d5. After knight d4, knight takes d4, queen d1, knight d1, c takes d4, and f3 here. So if we look at the position, we can see that this pawn on d4 may be weak, and white has an enormous center here. Though maybe with the lack of pieces on the board, it's maybe less significant, because I mean, if we imagine this position but with queens on the board, and like white being able to castle next move, then the pawn majority may even advance, and it's going to be very dangerous for black to deal with. But with the queens off the board, it's maybe a little more holdable. And so rook c8 was played, and b3, and e5 was played here. So the reason e5 was played here is because I mean, the d4 pawn is going to be weak eventually, and there are no other ways to defend it. Like for example, if you play g6 and bishop g7 to try to support it, white is simply going to put pressure on it, play bishop b2, rook d1, and the pawn needs to be supported with, yeah, especially with this e5 move. So e5 was a good decision here by Darius. And g4 was played, which I really like this move because the computer recommends something like knight f2, for example. And the reason that I think knight f2 is slow is because it allows the move h5. And I mean, white would prefer if g4 was already included to possibly push g5 and gain some space. But here, black already gained some space for themselves, and I think black is doing okay here. And so Wesley decides to go for g4 here, just getting space. After bishop e7, king e2, h5, maybe a slight inaccuracy because it allows to move g5, knight d7, and bishop d2, castles, knight f2, and in this position a6 was played. So this looks pretty natural to try to go for the b5 break, but the computer recommends maybe something like f5, though a6 isn't like a losing move or anything. So we proceed. Knight d3 was played, and f5. So Darius decides to go for this break early to try to open up the f file. And after g takes f6 and g takes f6, maybe this decision was kind of wrong, because after g takes f6, we see in the game that the rooks get very active here with rook hg1, king h7, and rook g3. A very nice move just to double up the rooks. And here, rook g8 needed to be played to neutralize the g-file pressure, but here h4 was played, which is not a good move. And I'm pretty sure Wesley already saw this beforehand, and he evaluated the position correctly after rook g4, attacking the h4 pawn. f5 is kind of forced to defend the h4 pawn here. But after e takes f5 and rook takes f5, rook ag1, so this is like some immense pressure over on the g-file here. And rook e8, knight f2, rerouting the knight to a better square on e4. After knight f6, rook g7, king h8, rook f7 is a very nice move. And suddenly we see that black pieces are just stuck here. It's very difficult to move. And rook h5 is the only safe square for the rook. But after rook g6, knight g8, knight e4, we can see that this is going to be like we're seeing this position like it's almost like looking at a boa constrictor, just strangle the black pieces over here. After rook d8, bishop g5 is played, a very nice move. So getting the knight involved here with the trade of bishops, which was protecting also the d6 pawn. And so this d6 pawn is very loose, as we will see in the game. Rook h7 was played. After rook takes e7, rook takes e7, bishop takes h4, and in this position, black resigned because white is going to win back the exchange, and the d6 pawn is going to fall, and it's going to fall like a house of cards. So a very nice game by Wesley So there. Quite an unusual opening with this Moscow, but an interesting like queen g4 opening. But we saw eventually how white was able to gain the upper hand and just convert it to a very nice win. So we're going to move on to the next game here. Played between Daniel Naroditsky here against Jeffrey Shung, where he managed a great upset and also a very nice game. So this was also played in the second round, and Naroditsky opens up with d4. And after knight f6, knight f3, d5, and e3. So this is kind of surprising because maybe in the main lines, maybe what Daniel was thinking is that in the main lines you can't get an advantage over these 2700 super GMs. So just play something solid, and it's gonna lead to an equal position. It's not like white is in trouble to lose the game right out of the opening. So just play something solid here. After c5, knight bd2 was played. So another rare move. e6, b3, b6, bishop b2, bishop d6, bishop d3, c takes d4, e takes d4. And so we see with this exchange on d4, this bishop on b2 is quite blocked here, though we could make the case that maybe if the bishop was to come to b7, then it would also be blocked by its own pawn. But for that reason, we see that this bishop on b7 doesn't have great potential, and Jeffrey decides to play bishop a6, which is a good move to trade off the light square bishops, so black's bad bishop, because it's blocked by light squares. The center is being blocked by light squares. And after c4, castles, knight bd7, and knight e5 is played. So this is a very aggressive move. The idea is simple, to just go for f4 and try to get some kingside initiative here. And it's maybe a good practical decision because there's no immediate way to punish this, and it's also quite a reasonable move. And rook c8 and f4 as planned. Bishop b7. Noticing that white has not released attention on with c takes d5, and because namely black can recapture with the knight, and this diagonal has great potential in the future here. So for that reason, bishop b7 was played. Queen e2, rook c7, rook ae1, so just improving the pieces. And here queen e8 was played. Maybe a better move here would have been rook e8 in anticipation of the move f5, because if we were to play f5 now, then it would open up the e file, and the white queen is still on the e file here, so it wouldn't be very comfortable. But after queen e8, this allows the move f5, and yeah, after e takes f5, rook takes f5, rook e8 is just a tad bit too slow because white does get some play here with rook e to f1, and after rook e6, trying to defend the knight, cd5, bishop d5, and knight c4. And after knight takes e5 and d takes e5, bishop c5, king h1. To be honest, the first time I was looking at this position, I didn't know how to evaluate it at all. It looks very messy, and yeah, white does have like a very advanced e5 pawn here, but black's position seems to be reasonably okay, even though it's kind of slightly dodgy here. Though we can see that black has immense pressure along these two diagonals, so I thought that maybe black had some good play here, but white's pressure is immense here. So after knight e4, rook f4 was a nice move. The point being that knight e4 threatens a tactic, hopefully you all can see. Like for example, if white were to do nothing, a3, then hopefully you can spot black's next move. Yeah, it's very nice. It's a very pretty move, knight g3. And after hg3, rook h6. It's not going to be mate yet because we have rook h5, but this is not going to be pretty. I think bishop g2 is probably just winning on the spot here. Queen g2 and rook h5 is mate. And I mean, besides that, yeah, even rook h5 is winning with bishop g2 coming. So very nice move with knight e4 here. But after the accurate rook 5 to f4, so I mean this knight g3 doesn't work anymore because rook h4 blocks. And so for that reason, Jeffrey decides to go for f5, which is a very tricky move again. We can't take on f5 for the same knight g3 trick. And so b4 here was played. This position is already very complex, and b4 is an excellent move. So the idea is that white wants to trade off this strong bishop on d5 with a move like knight e3. But if you play knight e3 now, then something like bishop e3, queen e3, and yeah, without the c4 knight and with this immense diagonal still opened up, white is not going to have a good time. And so b4 is an excellent move here to clear up the e3 square. After bishop takes b4 and knight e3, g6 was played, and a3 just to give a little kick to the bishop. Bishop e7, knight d5, queen d5, queen f3 is a nice move to add more pressure on the e4 knight. And after knight c3, this was actually maybe a tactical miss because Naroditsky managed to find a very nice move here, which is bishop c4. So after bishop c4, black cannot take on c4 with the queen because the rook is defending it. And this is also skewer, we can see. So after rook takes c4 is forced. After queen d5, knight d5, and rook takes c4, white is simply up the exchange here. And this took like 22 more moves from this point on, but we can try to see the technique being applied. b5 was played, which just forces the rook to where it wants to go in the first place. And after rook c8, king f7, the engine recommends g4 here to be played. But I'm still wondering actually after 93, just probably gf5, I think it's good enough. Yeah, but Naroditsky decides to go for rook f3, just maybe threatening g4 and not allowing the knight e3 business. Knight b6, rook c7, knight c4, bishop c3, knight e5, rook h3, h5, rook takes a7, 4 here. And yeah, from this point on it should be pretty clinical, though. Yeah, one moment that black could have maybe given more resistance is by playing the move knight c6 here, but it's not like this line is forcing or anything. So understandably, there's a lot of things to calculate. For example, rook b7, knight d8, rook c7, king e8, rook c8, bishop a3. Yeah, and we can get into this endgame. And I mean, material-wise, if we count the points, then white is up 1 point. But it's a full bishop for the cost of 2 pawns, and the computer evaluates this as like +1 or something, but it's not like these lines are forcing at all. So understandably, Jeffrey decides to get some counterplay with f4, trying to immobilize the pawns. After rook b7, rook c6, the pawns fall, and yeah, white got a slightly passive here, but it's good enough. Especially after rook a2, the pawn is being pushed forward, and for the next couple of moves, just the pawn marched forward, and white was able to win a very nice game. So very nice find there with bishop c4, and yeah, this decision to not go for the most critical main lines and just to go for a solid double-edged position. And so the last game I want to show is a game played in round 3 between Darius Swiers with the white pieces against Daniel Naroditsky with the black pieces. Darius Swiers opens up with e4, and Naroditsky opens up replies with c5, knight f3, d6, d4, cd4, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, and g6. So this was actually quite a surprise to me. I didn't know, or maybe, I'm not very sure if Naroditsky is a dragon player himself, but quite unusual. And after bishop e3, bishop g7, and f3, knight c6, queen d2, we get a typical an English attack here with like castles. But we know that in the dragon, after this move order with castles and castles long, it's said that after d5, white has, black has achieved equality apparently if you play d5 in the Sicilians, you have more or less reached equality. But personally, I don't believe this, especially in the dragon after this d5 move. After e5 and knight d5, knight c6, bc6, and this move bishop d4. There are other ways maybe. Here if black wants to go for like an equal endgame, they could go for bishop d4, queen d4, and like queen b6 here, I believe. And this is most likely going to peter out to a draw. Which is why after this e5 move, I don't really like. Even though it's still theory, but it's not preferable, I think. Bishop c5 here is played, so the theoretical move. And here the most common move is to play the move bishop e6, and only then like play after knight e4, rook e8. But I guess it can transpose after rook e8, knight e4, and I think black had to go for bishop e6 here to transpose. For example, if we look at a line with bishop e6, knight e4, rook e8, I still think that white has the upper hand here, because the h4, h5 push is going to be very dangerous. And this is kind of forced to go for h4, and like h5 replying with this move. Bishop c4, knight f4, and we can trade like in this manner, f5, knight e6, and rook e1. This is equal, this is equal material, and black does seem like okay, but the computer values this as about +1, but it's like a borderline +1. So I don't know how to value this position. It's probably just better for white, but it's not that simple for white to take advantage of it. Either way, that's another discussion on the dragon itself. In this game, rook e8 was played. After knight e4, queen c7. So I don't know how far black's preparation was in this game, but I really don't like this move. I think that it's just very slow. It allows the move h4, h5, like as we see h4, and f5, knight d6 was played. And after rook d8, just trade off the bishop for the knight, and rook takes c8, h5, and this is, the structure is being undermined, and the rook on h1 is like fantastic here. So after knight b6 this move was chosen. Bishop takes b6 was played. After rook takes d2, there's an intermediate move with bishop c4, king f8, bishop takes c7, rook takes d1, rook takes d1, rook takes c7, and h6 g6. So inducing a weakness after h6, bishop h6 first, an intermediate move, king b1, and h6 g6. So if we look at this position and we try to evaluate it logically, we see that this pawn on g6 is weak, this pawn on c6 is weak. Maybe we can see that black has 3 pawn islands while white only has 2, which is preferable, definitely. And I think the most important thing here is that, the two most important things is that the white rook dominates the d file and can penetrate with rook d6, and the pawn on g6 and f5 are very weak because they're on light squares. So meaning that if white can somehow get this bishop to, let's say, e8 or something, then this g6 f5 structure is very difficult to defend. Yeah, so proceeding here, Darius played rook d6, attacking g6. After king g7, b4 was played. After bishop f4, threatening some kind of e4 tricks. Rook e6, rook b7, a3, and after a5, this was a very nice move, king b2. So king b2, and after a4, a4, and suddenly white gets an outside pass pawn, and even though they're down a pawn at this moment, it's still close. I mean, this position is close to winning for white, essentially. Yeah, I mean, unless black can like defend like a computer. So rook e7, king b3, c5, bishop b5, preparing the king to jump into c4, king f7, bishop c4, king g7, bishop d3, bishop g3, rook c6, and rook a5 here. Here I thought bishop f2 was just it had to be played, but there's a very nice move here with g4 and undermining this this structure. After e4, f takes e4, f g4, e5, g3, rook takes g6, king f8, bishop e4, bishop d4. Black doesn't need to play. Black can still keep defending this pawn, but white has two pass pawns here on the e file and the a file, so this is just going to be decisive. And so after rook c6, rook a5 was played, which is an inaccuracy because it allows us to move bishop e5. And here, bishop f2 is the only move to try to defend, but there's this very nice move, rook e6, attacking e5. After bishop d4, bishop e8, and we see the reason why this light squared, the pawns on the light square become very weak here. Yeah, black's just going to lose here. So after bishop e5, rook e7 was played, rook takes c5, so white wins back the pawn with a totally winning position. e4, f takes e4, f takes e4, rook c6, rook c7, trying to trade off pieces here, but after king b4, and yeah, black decides to trade off into this pawn down endgame where white has two pass pawns, and white's bishop is able to come back to cover the e2 square. So e3, bishop f3, king f6, and a5. Yeah, we can just see this technique, it's pretty clean. And a6, king c7. And in this moment, Darius played king d5, which is kind of questionable because I don't understand why you would leave the control of over the b6 square. You can just play a move like c4 here, let's see, and make some progress in this fashion. But nonetheless, king d5 is played, but it's still winning though. So king d6, bishop e2, bishop h4, king e6, bishop d8, king f7, g5, king g6, king a7, king f5, bishop e7, king e4, bishop c5, king d5, bishop b6, c4, and c5 is going to come. Yeah, we can just see king b8 is basically it's like a nothing move. It's just accepting death. c5, bishop a7, king d6, king c8, bishop g4, king d8, c6. And the reason that I want to show up like this game up to this point is because after bishop e8, a nice move here was played by Darius, which is c7 check. The point is that it's a fork, and after takes, there's king c6, and this pawn is going to queen, so bishop e8 runs into king b7, and yeah, it's the white king managed to enter the position with this with this very nice pawn sack. So brilliant game there by Darius, just punishing the dragon. And hopefully you enjoy this this video. At least to me, these were the most interesting games, and hopefully you learned a thing or two. So that's gonna be it from me. I hope you liked the video. Please like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you guys next time. Stay safe and have fun playing chess, everyone. Bye bye.